Yes.
Lucy?
Thank you. The Honourable Kirk Humphrey MP, Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, Mr. Corey Lane MP, Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry, Ms. Gabrielle Springer, Permanent Secretary, Mr. Brian Glynn, Managing Director, Americas European External Action Service, Ms. Miriam Farhan, Deputy Director General, International Partnerships, Her Excellency Malgorzata Vasilevska, Ambassador, European Union Delegation to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean countries, the OECS, CARICOM, and CARIFORUM, other members of the European Union and Barbados delegations, members of the press. My name is Jacqueline Wiltshire, and on behalf of the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this press briefing, which follows the courtesy call by the delegation of the European Union to Barbados. The call was made on the Honourable Kirk Humphrey, Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, and the parties discussed matters of mutual interest in relation to our collaborations in effective social policy and delivery of social services, particularly with respect to the most vulnerable among us. We will now invite the Deputy Director General International Partnerships, Ms. Miriam Farhan, to deliver her remarks. Madam.
Dear Minister, dear hosts, let me first tell you how happy I am to be with you today in Barbados from Brussels. It's a long overdue visit. We would have liked to come before, but the COVID circumstances prevented us from doing so. And the first objective of our visit, together with Brian Glynn, from Managing Director in the External Action Service, is to testify of the importance that the European Union pays in regards to its relationship with Barbados in particular and the Caribbean region in general. And we find ourselves at a specific moment where we felt this momentum had to be renewed now that circumstances allow. So the key message of my presence here would be that we in the European Union are extremely worried of pursuing and strengthening the partnership we have with the Caribbean region. My second message is also a message of happiness, because I have the pleasure, while being with you, to announce that the European Union has just disbursed the amount of 2.45 million euros, which equals, I think, more or less to 5.8 million Barbadian dollars, in support to the government policy on strengthening the social protection sector. And this move is a move extremely important now that we are just at in the beginning of the aftermath of the COVID crisis, knowing how much the sector of social protection is crucial to rebuild to support the people that have been affected. So it's a particularly opportune moment. This financial support is only the first tranche of an overall program that we have agreed together, which amounts altogether to 3.65 million euro or 8.8 million Barbadian dollars. And we pay a lot of attention and importance to the design of this project, because it's a multi-dimensional project which touches of the several branches that need to be supported to have a comprehensive system. And this program will, on the one hand, increase social protection coverage with the overall objective to reduce extreme poverty and unemployment. And it will do so in support of a comprehensive policy framework. And this is what in the European Union we want to do, is support the policy of a government, not just intervene with small projects. Really, our partnership approach is one where the European Union can elaborate a policy framework, discuss a policy framework with the government, and support the overall policy of the government. And this is, in this respect, I wanted to congratulate you for the adoption of the new social protection strategy and policy, which we very much value, and we are quite happy to be able to support now its implementation through our collaboration. If we look ahead, if I still can speak 2 minutes, the timing of our visit also coincides with the fact that the European Union has just adopted a new strategy in terms of its vision for connectivity in the world in the next period, for the period from 2021 to 2027. And this strategy is called Global Gateways. By Global Gateways, the European Union wants to help its partner all over the world to implement policy reforms which aim at tackling global challenges. And of course, vulnerabilities and social protection are among the key priorities. The priorities we have been identifying are, I know, some of them are extremely dear to the government and your Prime Minister. And first one of it will be fighting climate change, supporting what we call in the European Union the Green Deal. And there again, the European Union will be able to provide support to our partners, and in particular, including and in particular in the Caribbean region, which we know is extremely vulnerable to climate change. So I just wanted to announce this policy framework, and one of the reasons of our presence here is to be able to discuss the new modalities of cooperation that the European Union wants to develop with a big change of paradigm, moving from a donor-recipient approach to that of true partner who want to collaborate to address global challenges. And this is really the spirit behind this Global Gateway strategy. Thank you, Minister.
And thank you very much, Deputy Director General. I will now invite the Honourable Kirk Humphrey, Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, to address you. Minister?
Thank you very much, Madam Master of Ceremonies. Thank you as well to all the representatives of the EU who are here. Thank you for your very kind words. And thank you for your kind support to Barbados. As you would have heard, the members of the press, thank you as well for coming out this afternoon to be here with us. Let me first welcome you as the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs. In all previous iterations of our contact, I welcomed you as Maritime. And let me welcome you to this particular office. It is a pleasure to have you here, and I do hope that we have regular conversations, because one of the things we decided as a ministry would be that we would need to engage the press more and engage the public more about the things that we are doing to uplift the people in this country. And of course to speak to and about our partners who are helping us to be able so to do. I want to really thank the European Union this afternoon for the support. It is almost $9 million Barbadian dollars in support, which for us is a significant amount of money that would allow us to do things on behalf of the poor and the vulnerable and the marginalized in Barbados. And we are very happy to be able to have the funds. I think a point that must not be missed is the point made that this is about supporting a Barbadian design program. This is not a case where the EU has designed a program for us. We have designed in Barbados a Barbados social protection policy, strategy, and implementation plan for a rationalized national social protection system for Barbados, designed in Barbados for Barbados, but that we're being supported to be able to execute our plan. And I think that point is important and needs to be made. It is Barbadian grown for Barbadians. The importance of the support, though, is that it allows us to be able to do the things that we had imagined for ourselves. and that we had imagined for the country and for the people who exist in this country. There are a number of things, as you would appreciate, as we try to define who we are in terms of our capacity to be able to help the persons who need help the most. We said, for example, and I made the announcement before, we wanted to amalgamate our social services. We felt it was important to be able to reduce the duplication, to reduce the cost, to be better able to service the people who need servicing the most, to be able to bring those services closer to the people. The amalgamation of the social services is extremely important in our estimation to be able to do so that we are able to offer the best kind of programming going forward. That is why I also like the conversation we had before the media came, where we talked about sharing the best practice as well. I think the conversations that we also had spoke to not only receiving financial support, but building a policy dialogue and building out a partnership, a true partnership. I must tell you, when I had heard originally that the EDF was no longer going to be, I was somewhat concerned. But seeing what has come from the European Union is now even more imaginative, and it offers the possibility of a lot more support for Barbados and for Caribbean countries. So I'm very thankful for that as well. It's also important for us to note that as part of our social protection programming beyond the amalgamation, we also want to be able to discuss disaster risk. And you would have seen in the last 2 years, certainly, that Barbados is extremely vulnerable to a lot of things. COVID has done to Barbados what it did to the majority of the world. But for a country like Barbados, where we found ourselves receiving a lot of our goods, the supply chain interruptions and so on, it was extremely costly. And that this particular ministry, and I must thank the former minister, Minister Cynthia Ford, for the amazing work that she did during her time as minister to be able to help the most needy and the vulnerable in Barbados, as well as the PS and the entire team. But you would have realized that after dealing with COVID and Hurricane Elsa and Ashfall and the freak storm, it was almost as if everything that we could possibly conceive of in the last few years that hadn't happened to Barbados determined that it was going to happen in a few years, and that this ministry was called to respond, but to respond in a way that would offer us the opportunity to show that we could protect the most vulnerable amongst us. And that is why we need to have a social protection policy. That's why we need to have a program that works. That is why we have to be able to offer a response, but also to be able to think ahead and to think about considering these emerging threats and challenges. How do we respond to those threats and challenges? And it is in that context, again, that we are so thankful for the support from the European Union in our quest to be able to offer a proper social development plan going forward. It is clear to me, given the pressures that came to bear on the system, that this is necessary support. You may appreciate that in the last year, the support that the Welfare Department has had to offer persons in terms of the need to be able to respond to them. We were averaging, in terms of national assistance, around 900, I think it was around 100,000 a month, about 900 to $1 million a year. And now we are averaging about 900,000 a month in support. So that you will see that our capacity to respond has been obviously under some pressure. When you move from offering, when 900,000 a year was what you were offering in national assistance, and now you're almost offering, being asked to offer that a month, you could understand that the government found itself under some pressure. And it therefore reinforces the point that there is a need for social protection, because the last year has put so much pressure on the system. If we could build the resilience of our people, and perhaps we wouldn't need to find ourselves under so much pressure. And we're going to be using some of these funds to be able to do so, to be able to help the most vulnerable to think thoroughly about these issues. The truth is that climate change issues and issues of social protection are so intimately and intrinsically linked that we don't think about it. But the persons who are most affected by these things are always the poor, are always the most vulnerable. You know, the persons with disabilities, the elderly amongst us. So even as we go forward, these are the issues that we are going to face. And I am very thankful for this support. I'm very thankful for our long-standing friendship. And I think it is also important to note that this is not a friendship that has just started. This is a long-standing friendship. It is also one that is not deepened because of the absence of the UK, but one that is rich, and that because we share common values, it is easy to build upon this friendship. And I am very happy to have you here as friends and to be able to help build out a social protection that links our shared values, but also allows us to respond to the world in a way that would elevate the entire world. So I just want to say those few words and to thank the press for being here and to thank you as well also for being here. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Minister. And now I'm going to invite members of the press to pose their questions to. I'm sorry.
I want Mr. Glenn to say a few words, and I also want the ambassador to say a few words.
Okay. Okay, they will all be saying, and that can all be accommodated in the order. So, if we can, Mr. Glenn, we're going to invite you to say your few words.
Thank you very much, Minister, dear colleagues. I come from a country where the concept of a few words doesn't exist. I come from Ireland, and usually
Perhaps the MC was aware of that.
when you're asked to speak, you can continue until the sun goes down and people are falling asleep. But it is the country in the European Union. My colleague Miriam comes from France, which is a country that's present in the Caribbean. Ireland and Irish people have been present in the Caribbean for a very long time. So in the European Union now, I think the country that understands the English-speaking Caribbean best is Ireland. And I've only been in Barbados for 2 hours, and I can already hear a little bit of the accent of the south of Ireland in Barbados. So I'll be going around recording you all to go back to Ireland and say, look, we're everywhere. But as the Minister mentioned, the relationship between the European Union and Barbados, the Caribbean, and Latin America and the Caribbean in its widest sense, this is not a new relationship. We've been present here in Barbados for 45 years. We hope to be present for another 45 years. And that relationship is one in which we have evolved and Barbados has evolved. Barbados has graduated to a new category of country. That category of country comes with some disadvantages when it comes to traditional funding streams, but for me I see it as a badge of honour for Barbados. It's graduated into a category of success. It's a country that now has a much higher income per capita than it had. Yes, it has to deal with the issues the Minister mentioned, particularly in the area of resilience, particularly when it comes to the effects of climate change. But it's a country that has grown in confidence, and as long as we are here, we will accompany Barbados and the policy that is decided by the democratically elected government of Barbados as much as we can. One of the interesting, as Miriam said, we're in this interesting phase now in the European Union where we used to have the EDF, as the Minister said, and now we have an array of funding streams that previously would not have been open to countries with an income per capita of Barbados, but especially programs and projects that have a regional impact that involve your neighbours in the Caribbean. There is an envelope of €200 million over the next 7 years just for the Caribbean, and I think I've no doubt that Barbados will participate in many of those programs. Prime Minister Motley is becoming the personification of Barbados and the Caribbean outside of your country. She's very well known in Brussels. She's coming back to us, I think, early in this year. And she is a very articulate advocate for not just Barbados, but all of the Caribbean. And we've listened to what she has had to say and other leaders in the Caribbean have had to say. We come not apologising that we haven't been here for the last few years, because we do have an excuse in that COVID meant it was difficult for us to be here. But behind these high-level visits, the day-to-day work that's carried out by our delegation here and the very large number of people we have in our delegation here in Barbados has been going on throughout that time. And I think the announcement today on the social protection side is a very good example of us listening and hearing what the priorities of Barbados are. So what I would like to say is, for me, it's my first trip to Barbados. I very much hope it won't be my last. I expect that in the next few years, the leadership that Barbados is showing in the region will be something that will grab our attention even more in Brussels, in the European Union. And I hope that this partnership, which is based on the most human level, the things that we've been discussing today, will also find a greater recognition at the political level. And I'm very optimistic that will be the case. And I do hope, as I said also, that the nationality that I come from is a good example of what the European Union is about. A country like Ireland, 150 years ago, 1 million people starved and 1 million people had to emigrate. We had half the population on the island from 1850 to 1900 either starved to death or emigrated. So we do have a greater understanding of the challenges that come from being vulnerable, being an island nation. And for me, in my job, I cover all the countries from Canada to Chile in the Americas, but the Caribbean has a special place in my heart. And as I said, I hope this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. And I think also the next ambassador that we send to Barbados will have to have an Irish name rather than a Polish name, as I know that it's a bit of a struggle for Barbadians to pronounce Scotia's name. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Mr. Glynn. Mr. Glynn is Managing Director of the Americas European External Action Service. And now it is my pleasure to invite Her Excellency, the Ambassador Vashkileska, to give her remarks.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having the floor. It's a huge honor and a privilege for me to be here with the newly appointed minister to announce the launch of this particular support to the government of Barbados. As you said, Minister, huge thanks also to the previous minister with whom we worked in preparation of the program. The disbursement comes at a particularly crucial time because of the huge vulnerabilities that the pandemic exposed and sort of opened our eyes to. I wish we could have had more funds. I want to stress that this is budget support, which is not only support to the policy developed and driven by the government, but it's also a huge sign of confidence in the public finance management and the ability of the government to deliver those key programs to the people, because we do not measure expenditure. As we say, we don't follow the penny, we look at the results. And if the results are achieved, it is up to you as the government exactly how you manage the funds. So it's not every country that qualifies for budget support. It's a small detail, but a very important one. To mark the importance of our partnership. We will continue, as my colleagues have said. I'm particularly happy to welcome our senior directors here. It's been a long time since we had that level of officials from Brussels come to the region and to Barbados. So I'd like to say that it's definitely a sign that Brussels is listening and watching and following from a distance. It might be a small country, but look how important it is. They came quite quickly, his first visit to the Caribbean, and my managing directors are already in Barbados. I'm not so sure I agree with the Irish name for the next ambassador. I see huge progress, and we promote multiculturalism and multilingualism. The Madam of Ceremony has done a fantastic job in pronouncing my name, so no, the next one would be Romanian. We have already invited Minister to come to Brussels and to visit some of our member states where the social protection programs are or policies are particularly impressive, to establish relationship with specific ministries and countries, and for us to explore whether we can do some transfer of best practices and so on. For that, we will have mechanism to support that. But we also want the region to get to know the Europe of 27 better, and we want Europe to understand more about the region. So I think this would be, there'll be many benefits of that. We'll choose a good season of the year, so you're not too cold. And last but not least, I'd like to say that I'm particularly happy about this program because I've been here a little bit longer than 2 hours. And in delegation, we watch with admiration the people-focused approach of this government to make sure that you address the problems across the society. So it's a pleasure to be here, and we look forward to working closely with the ministry. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. As we heard before, the Ambassador is Ambassador of the European Union Delegation to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean countries, the OECS, CARICOM, and CARIFORUM. And now your time has come, members of the press. And so we're going to invite you to put your question, pose your question to the persons at the head table. And as usual, I'm going to ask you to identify yourselves before you pose your question. And Wayne Lewis of the European Union is going to help me with this. And therefore, I'm going to ask you to pose your first question.
My first question is directed to Mr. Humphrey. Know that some persons within a picture of the divide or the widening of the gap between the vulnerable and the wider society at this point. And also, while you're at it, the second question would be with the type of immense pressure that you have outlined, the moving up, I can't even do the maths on that one, from 900,000 a year to 900,000 a month. How do you propose to narrow that gap, at least back to pre-COVID measures and whatever time frame you might be looking at?
So in response to well, first of all, before you answer the questions, we are very happy to have Gosha here. And if a person comes with an easier name, I hope they're as hardworking as Gosha is. So in relation to the first question, I think we don't need science to tell us that it was obvious that persons who were affected by the pandemic were more affected by the fact that they were marginalized or poor. That is the reality all over the world. And in circumstances where conditions become difficult, then it's always more difficult on the poor. And we obviously would have seen that in the ministry. I think your second question brings to bear the reality that there's been tremendous pressure on the system. I think the point that we have to make is that these conditions may lead us to a circumstance where you have the transient poor, where people are just passing through poverty, and that we must build a society that is so resilient and to put in place through these kinds of programs the kind of protection mechanisms to allow people not to find themselves residing there permanently. And I think that is going to be the task that is before us now. All over the world, and Barbados is not special in this regard, all over the world you've seen an increase, I'm pretty sure, in poverty. We haven't done the country assessment of living conditions. That is the poverty study that we were hoping to be able to do. We will do one that would give us, through the SLC, a better understanding of the percentage of persons in poverty in Barbados. And the country assessment of living conditions should soon be done. At least we're having the conversation now. That will give us an idea of who's in poverty. The MPEA part of that will tell us why they're in poverty and those realities. But it would also give us the opportunity to be able to build out what are some of the mechanisms that we now need to put in place to take people from in these circumstances. As I said, I hope this is cases where many people are passing through, and we have to make sure that they don't stay there. So, one, I think the government should be commended for being able to respond the way that it has responded during COVID. For a country the size of Barbados, I think our response has been, an example for the rest of the world. No one was left behind, whether it was through monetary assistance, whether it was through the food hampers that the government offered, the $600 program that we offered, the expansion of welfare assistance that we offered as well, to make sure that at least every single household had some kind of provision, whether it was monetary or food. I think the government has to be commended for that. I I also think the pandemic has regrettably exposed to Barbados that we've had some comfort that, that we now need to rethink. Climate change is real. The Prime Minister says it all the time. I used to say it in my other ministry. The potential and the propensity for more hurricanes, for more storms, will mean that Barbadians are continuously going to be exposed. I think there are going to be a number of things we have to do, and that is why I think you have to understand our program holistically. When we talk about the roof-to-reef program, we want to make sure that we build stronger houses so that people have houses. We want to make sure that we deal with the runoff so that less houses are flooded. We want to make sure that in terms of the environmental threats, we take care of people. That's important. That's one. We also now must look at the things we're doing in relation to being able to offer people the opportunities for advancement. So when we talk about building up our young people through the Youth Advanced Corps, whether you look at the training through the National Training Initiative, I mean, all the various training programs to give people tools and to retool, to be able to be a different person going forward, to be able to have these new skills. Whether you look at what we're doing in education in relation to being able to offer people coding and robotics, and just develop new tools, the world has changed. So when people present to social service agencies, it's normally at the end of the line almost. It's normally when almost everything else has failed. People don't walk into welfare just so. People don't walk and ask for national assistance just like that. It's normally when all these other mechanisms have failed. We've had some external pressures that obviously catapulted that in the last 2 years, but those are normally, our services exist normally at the end of the line. So people look at the end of the line, but it's all those things along the continuum, all the programs we're offering all along the continuum, strengthening our healthcare system. I think when we do all these things, and in each of these things, Colville, the government is doing something. So when we do all these things, I think it's going to redound to the benefit of the entire country. But the truth is, the increase in the monetary spending is significant. There's no doubt about it. There is no doubt about it. And the welfare department, while they've been busy doing all this work, they haven't had a lot of other support. Like, we need more staff going forward. We need to be able to respond quicker going forward. I also feel that if we can respond to people where they are, it would result in less people coming to the system for help. So we have to be able to rethink it. That is why I believe this program that we're talking about, social protection in Barbados, this has to be comprehensive. And it has to be that we look at every single component as to why people are in the state that they are. And why it is that, the poor will always feel these circumstances hardest, right? But the question that we have to ask and answer for ourselves is that, is it in Barbados a case where the poor are disproportionately affected than in other countries? And if that is yes, and I don't think it is, but if that is yes, why is the answer? Why is that yes? But more importantly, what are we going to do about it? And so that is why I think we need to have these programs. That is why we need to have the exchange. That is why we need to have the support. So even though these circumstances are difficult, I am hopeful. For those who are saying that we're at the end of COVID, I'm very happy to hear that we're at the end of COVID. I've said, according to some scientists, according to scientist Colville, I hope we really are at the end of COVID. But if we're not, I just know that we have to be able to build a society. We can't stop the hurricanes. God knows we can't stop another pandemic, but what we can do is prepare ourselves to be ready in the event that they happen.
You mentioned some numbers earlier in terms of the increase from 900,000 per year to 900,000 monthly. Could you translate that in terms of the increase in actual persons on the system? And also, in terms of the actual funding that we are looking at, have you already earmarked and designed a program for that, or is that something that you now have to get off the ground?
Cover, I knew you were going to ask me this, I knew it. So we've moved from about 3,500 persons to about 6,500 persons. So there's been almost a doubling of the persons. There's also been an increase in the frequency with which they would want help. It's no longer one-offs. People are going to keep coming back. So there is that additional pressure on the system. We've looked at a number of areas that we would like to be able to strengthen in terms of some of the gaps. I would ask the parliamentary secretary to look at a few of those things.
All right. Thank you, Minister, and good afternoon to everyone. So some of the areas we're definitely strengthening is the areas of research, and that way we have evidence-based methodologies to our approaches. So in other words, when we look at a situation, we realize you need a hat, we don't give you a shoe. And that is why research and surveys and so on are very, very important. When we talk about vulnerability as well, there are some areas that we are identifying, particularly like single women, elderly with dementia, the disabled, and so on. So all these are areas that we are definitely going to strengthen where we're looking at social protection. Just understanding that social protection is about people, and the fact that we have a number of people finding themselves in the category of most vulnerable.
We visited on our tour just this week. That was this week. Between last week and this week, we were on a tour. We went to Sterling, what used to be Sterling Children's Home. I know that the former minister had a view that's shared by the PS. It's also shared by me, that Andy Powell said that we should be in a position to do something with Sterling. And there are a number of single females in Barbados with children, who often find themselves, for one reason or the other, at the mercies of the state and without a place, to sleep. And we were thinking of the possibility, just thinking, it hasn't been approved, of the possibility of using that facility to be able to house these these single women with children who are often exposed. I mean, if the pandemic has taught me anything, it is that children, because Barbados is predominantly still a female-headed household society for the most part. And, when these things come to bear, when you hear a female is evicted or a female doesn't have the revenue, it is normally a female and children, regrettably. And there's no place for them to go. So we were thinking about being able to retrofit that at least, to be able to house persons who find themselves in this state. Because I feel a lot of these things have to be transitional, that the policies that we build must be that the resilience part of it is important, but that people go, they don't stay. You'd have a circumstance where you put people in temporary housing, but it becomes permanent. So that we haven't improved their circumstances. We have to improve people's circumstances so that these transitional phases are genuinely transitional. So I hope that answers the question.
To complement the minister and to add one of the things or some of the things that are going to be added there is not just the housing, and they're going to have the training, and there's transitional homes. We want to get them equipped with some skills in terms of things like farming. The whole list is a very long list of things. So those are the sort of things when we talk about people empowerment, we're going to see social protection as the first step. We're going to stabilize, and then we're going to empower so that they go up, and then, as the minister said, it'll be transitional. That's to help them and the society. We don't have to be coming back all the time. They can stand on their own two feet.
Some timeline as to when we can start see some tangible benefits for the program that we're talking about, the social protection, as well as the national assessment survey.
I think the point that was made by the ambassador is one that shouldn't be lost, which is that this is budget support funding, which means that they trust us enough to be able to spend the money wisely, basically. And that is important. It means that we now have to be able to design programs that are robust and that will improve the lives of people. I can tell you that we've already discussed about 3 programs, and I wouldn't want to say haphazardly here because I haven't had a chance to discuss it with my colleagues properly, but that in the very near future, certainly by next month, by the end of next month, you'll be in a position either to start or at least for me to tell you what some of those projects are going to be. In terms of the country assessment, that's what you mean, the country assessment of living conditions. The country assessment of living conditions is a study that we do now. We've been working very steadfastly with our partners, and I think even beyond the country assessment of living conditions we do with the Caribbean Development Bank. And that's just a survey of poverty, really. So it has a number of components. One is the institutional assessment, which looks at the capacity of institutions to be able to deliver the services that they're supposed to deliver. It's a PPA, RPA, the participatory poverty assessment. which is people's own understanding of poverty and why they're in it and how they intend to get out of it, because our belief is that people understand poverty and how to get out of it. There is the SLC component, which is the survey of living conditions, and then there's one other component. But those are the three main components. The survey of living conditions is basically where you do the actual questionnaires and get a figure so you could define your poverty line, your vulnerability line, and so on. That conversation with CDB had already started. If it is up to me, we would either be doing that poverty study very quickly this year or next year. It would be nice to have a baseline, to know where we are now, so that we could say, yeah, this is where we were in 2022, and these are the things that we've been able to implement, and hopefully, and to report progress. But you would appreciate that a poverty study done immediately after a pandemic would probably reflect numbers according to Dr. Colville, Sanders Colville, near the end of a pandemic would be high. So, but it's something that we're looking at. But CDB, and we are actively in conversations now with CDB. No date. The CDB study is a study that's done across the region. You would recall Barbados actually did a survey, a calc, in 2000 and sometime, maybe about 10 years ago. We also had a poverty study done with the IDB. There's a lot of preparatory work that goes into the thing. Since I became minister, I must tell you that I've asked the staff about how soon can we engage the CDB to get the poverty study going. But I couldn't possibly give you a date not without consulting cabinet. But it is something that is in the forefront of my mind.
Earlier you mentioned that no one was left behind. When we have these wonderful people here. I mean, one more question for the minister. You mentioned earlier that we had no one left behind. You mentioned that we were assisting throughout the pandemic. But I know personally of some people who said that they tried endlessly to get, but they did not benefit, and they're among the vulnerable. Could you say what mechanisms will be put in place to ensure that the most vulnerable benefit from all programs that we're talking about?
Well, I am keen to know, the persons of whom you are speaking. If you have names, I would gladly take them and press on with that as well. There is always going to be, in cases like this, I believe for the most part people know where to go to get services and where to access those services. I know, for example, that the government has, as you've seen in the numbers, you've seen the food stuff and so on that we've been able to distribute. I know that we've also been able to do that as well. There are always going to be cases in a country like Barbados where the persons who perhaps either, one, haven't engaged with social services because they chose not to, or there's some people who would have benefited sometimes and do not consider it necessarily a benefit, like a one-off voucher or something. And then there are cases, persons who may not want to, for whatever reason, associate themselves with social services. Those are things that have happened. I also feel that as we build out, we have to make it clear. I've said to all the staff in the ministry going forward, we must make ourselves, one, in the restructuring exercise, closer to the people. So what we're intending to do is to have these smaller satellite offices all over Barbados for the Ministry of Family Services, Department of Family Services. So instead of having to go to town to go to welfare, or instead of having to come to Warrens to access the ministry, you go to the various agencies that will be located in the communities. It makes it a lot easier for people to be able to access these social services. So that makes it easier. We have to promote the products that we offer. The other thing is, people think that when we say persons benefit from the ministry, that all we offer are the issues pertaining to national assistance. But there are many things being offered by the Ministry for Family Services that we consider to be a benefit to persons as well. So, look, I know in my constituency, for example, I've heard people say, and this is just being blunt now, I've heard people say in some circumstances that they receive no assistance. But then when you investigate, oftentimes these people receive assistance. Or when you do the actual, because you don't just give, you have to assess the circumstances. When you do the assessment, some people may be receiving income, as is the case. Some people might be receiving a pension, they might be receiving support. Some might have been receiving the funds from the household mitigation unit. They don't consider that to be welfare, so they don't mention that as part of the services. but there is a whole set of services that are available to people in Barbados. For the most part, I could say, and this is not even being minister, this is before that. For the most part, I would say that a person who presents to the social services agency, and that's the first thing they have to present. But if they present to the agency and that they are deserving of the support, honestly, I can think of no case where that person is deserving of the support and is unable to get it. And if the person has fallen through the cracks, when it's made known to us, then we will make sure that they get it. But that it still has to be an assessment. You still have to be assessed. You still have to make sure you're not working, make sure that you're not getting, because there is, traditionally in social services, there's what we call agency shopping. Persons might get support from the household mitigation unit, they leave there, they go and they get support from the welfare department, they get support from another agency, and so on. So there are all kinds of reasons why these things could happen. But if you do have names, going back to my original point, if you do have names, then I would gladly receive them. If there's anybody now within the sound of my voice too who feels as if they haven't been able to receive these services, but that they are deserving of these services, then I would encourage them to make contact with the ministry so that we can properly assess and help persons. Because we do not, no government, and especially a government like ours, but no government really wishes to leave a single person behind. And so, as I said, if there are known cases, please let me know.
Unfortunately, we can only take one more question.
And
We
hopefully,
have one stop to make, and after this, and that's how we execution. So we can only take one more question.
ask them.
Marlon and Pablo, I know you want to ask questions. Hold it. You know, we over there.
Minister, I want to know, yes, for you, how close we are to seeing the evaluation of the social support departments under one umbrella. And then also we have school reviewing and the jobs reviewing next week. We heard the chief education officer acknowledge that some parents because of the pandemic may not be able to provide school uniforms and other things their children will need. How will your ministry be assisting in this regard?
So, the ministry, let me start with the second question first. The ministry has always assisted with uniforms, for sure. So again, if persons have to come to the welfare department to make their request known, then I encourage them to come forward. But we've always been offering support with uniforms. I must say, I also feel that it is perhaps, and speaking on behalf of my own constituents, the pressure that has been brought to bear by persons having to find a uniform so late is also something that I think we may have to reconsider, or at least think on in terms of the ministry. Because, there are many people who would have heard school is going to start at different points in time. So many poor people are in a position where getting a uniform is really difficult. And so do we need necessarily to have a uniform for the first day of school? It's something that we should look at. But for the persons who have to get a uniform, then I would encourage them to come to the welfare department. That's why we need to find the name and the name change and get the ministry going, because, to tell somebody, go to welfare, it doesn't necessarily sound good. And then I know that my colleagues have to leave. So very quickly, in terms of the restructuring, this restructuring didn't just start. We've been working on this for like the last maybe year and a half, 2 years. The cabinet had a committee for its restructuring. The minister and we were on the committee. Just today, we were saying, and that is why, even as you spoke, I leaned over to PS and I was suggesting, it would be nice to have these skills to help us actually restructure the ministry, because we've done a lot of the work in terms of the social planning, and I know in the estimates there's funds for a change management consultant to help us do that. My personal desire would be to have us in a position where we're actually engaging the public and the unions in the next few weeks. I would like to think that within a year, we could really be telling the public about a ministry, Department of Family Services, and here's why. This Department of Family Services, this restructuring and rationalization started long ago. There's a Royal study, and I think it was one before that, but in 1997 there was a Royal study that looked at the restructuring. When I was here as Director of Social Policy, there was a study that also looked at the restructuring. There was another in between there. So there's a lot of material in terms of restructuring the ministry. We just now need, and everybody in principle has agreed with it, all the various governments have agreed with it. In this particular iteration of the restructuring, it was a lot of it was spearheaded by the staff of the ministry. So the heads of all the various agencies, so they've committed to it. We don't expect that level of pushback. So it is just the cabinet has already seen the first draft of it, and so there some tweaks have to be made. But I suspect that we will be in a position to speak very seriously about where we are in a few weeks. Thank you, Kenny. I want to thank, as I close, I want to really thank all the representatives from the European Union. Unfortunately, y'all didn't get to use this opportunity to tell them how much, to ask them about the work that they're doing in Barbados and why they chose Barbados for this particular support. But I really want to thank you for your support to Barbados and to this country. It really, really means a lot, the faith that you've shown in the country. I also want to thank you for coming. Having worked in an international agency, it is not always easy to get high-level representation to come to country. So we are very thankful that you chose Barbados. We truly are. And I do hope that we get to deepen this relationship. As you can tell from the questions, that there are a number of things that we have to do in Barbados, and this support for our social protection is going to be very important. So thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. I'm closing for you. Thank you so much, Master of Ceremonies. Thanks to all who were at the head table, and I wish you all a very wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much.